Good afternoon and welcome to the public forum of the 28th Hydrogen and Fuel Cells Europe exhibition. We still have quite some seats left here, so I would invite everybody in the back there to come have a seat. The drinks are on the house here, so that's another good reason to get a seat here. I will be talking about the main opportunities in the green hydrogen value chain, and on stage will be Galp, and then specifically the head of hydrogen business development. Can I please get an applause for Diogo Almeida? Diogo, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so Galp is the company, and I think for the people who have ever been driving around in Portugal, they've probably seen something, or Spain as well. Okay, that's a good addition. But for those of us who have never visited the south of Europe then, what is Galp?
Well, Galp is an integrated energy company. Besides Portugal and Spain, we also have activity in Brazil and in some countries in Africa. We have upstream activities, so our legacy business has upstream activities in oil and gas in Brazil, in Africa. We have a refinery in southern Portugal, and we have all our B2B and B2C portfolio of clients and the 1,200 stations in Portugal, Spain, some in Africa also. So this is the legacy business of Galp. But from, I'd say, 6 years to now, we've been also developing our energy transition strategy. We've bought and started developing a large renewable portfolio in Iberia, 4 gigawatts of capacity. We also have just recently announced the acquisition of 4 gigawatts of renewables in Brazil also. So we're starting to build this sort of integrated position also in South America. And on top, we have two new value chains. One is the battery value chain. We're building a lithium refining plant in Portugal also to help the battery value chain develop in Europe. And in the hydrogen value chain, we're building a large capacity. We want to reach 1.5 gigawatts of electrolysis capacity to produce green hydrogen and some derivatives by 2030.
All right, so that's quite a lot going on there. And you already mentioned 6 years ago, and I think it's by chance, but I know you worked at Galp for 20 years already, but you've been in the strategy department for the last 6 years, so It sounds like you've been doing some good work there.
Yeah.
And from that position, I can imagine that you can really see the landscape of all these different kinds of energies, whether it be oil, gas, hydrogen, electricity, whatever. You've seen it change the landscape. And how do you guys, what is your strategy at Galp to deal with these changes?
Okay, so first of all, we expect to decarbonize our own activity. So what usually is called the Scope 1 of emissions, also Scope 2, but mostly in our case, Scope 1 has a large impact. So that's where we're starting with, and hydrogen will play a large role there because a lot of our emissions, especially in the refinery, come from the production of hydrogen for our chemical processes within the refinery. So that's one part. But we also know that we have a very important role in helping the rest of society, well, our clients, decarbonize. If we don't provide them with products with a lower carbon content, they don't have the chance to do that, right? When you get to the filling station, you get what you get, right? So we are working on that also, so to lower the carbon intensity of our processes, but also to start providing new products. We have a large electric mobility business in Iberia also, and we are developing the hydrogen value chain, which roughly 25% of all emissions don't seem to be electrifiable. and when you cannot use electricity, most likely you'll need some sort of hydrogen or hydrogen derivative to replace the carbon products that you use today. So that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and you already mentioned it. You know, two of those points come down to decarbonization, right? And you already mentioned hydrogen there, and I think that is a good point. When we're talking about decarbonization of large amounts of energy, hydrogen, comes in the picture. And so, what are some of the activities of Galp, related to hydrogen?
Well, our hydrogen strategy, we're mainly focused on green hydrogen, okay, which, given the fact that we are in Portugal and Spain, makes sense. We have excellent renewable resources there, some of the lowest LCOEs in Europe, both in wind and in solar. So we believe we'll be able to be very competitive in producing green hydrogen.
Maybe for the audience,
Yeah.
what is an LCOE exactly?
Sorry. The levelized cost of hydrogen, the levelized cost of electricity. So
Okay.
basically, not taking into account taxes, it's the price that you need to have to remunerate a renewable generation project to pay for it and to have an acceptable profitability. Let's put it this way. So what does it mean? It means that we believe that in Southern Europe we will be able to produce the cheapest green hydrogen and the cheapest hydrogen on average in Europe. And so we also believe that will allow us to decarbonize at a discount, first of all, and to help our clients also decarbonize their own activities, either in mobility or in industry. And on top of that, we also want to attract new businesses to Portugal and to Spain. So heavy industries willing to have lower carbon activities, they will be able to. Honestly, I think it will be cheaper to bring final products, end products to Europe than hydrogen. So at least in the first years, and I expect to talk a little bit more about that in the following minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
If I'm allowed.
Yeah, no, because you have a lot of experience in the oil and gas industry, not just you, but also especially Galp, as a company. So you know what it takes to get a specific energy carrier to that sort of established point, right? And the value chain of hydrogen, there's a lot of developments and they're all in the right direction, but there is still a lot to go through, I think. There are still a lot of challenges. And when I told you challenges, you said, no, those are opportunities. So what are those opportunities then?
Look, yes, we've started, but if this was a marathon, we could still see the starting point, right? What we need to develop in the hydrogen value chain in the coming, in the coming 10 years for sure, and it will keep growing afterwards, but the targets that we have in Europe to accelerate this transition are huge. So starting with the electrolyzers themselves, okay? We need to reach 200 gigawatt of installed capacity by 2030. Those are the numbers that we get from the recent REPowerEU document presented by the European Commission. Presently, we have the manufacturers all together produce around 1.7 gigawatts per year of capacity. If nothing was done, we would end up with more 15 gigawatts by the end of the decade. So we need to reach 200 gigawatts. So this is a huge challenge for the industry, and we need to find the best way to speed up this process. This is very challenging for the manufacturers also. Many of them are small companies starting 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and this is extremely challenging. We need to find processes to speed up this, standards in a new industry. As you said, we come also from an industry with a bigger legacy. And in the upstream, for instance, or in refining, we are used to this sort of standardization that helps agilize all the processes and increase safety. This is one big challenge, but also opportunity for all the companies working on this landscape. So that's one very important point, and it's the starting point. We need equipment to produce green hydrogen. Okay. The second one has to do with the competitiveness of the hydrogen that we will produce, and for that, obviously, we'll need equipment prices to go down, but that I think will happen with economies of scale and the maturity of the business. But more than 2/3 of the price of hydrogen is the price of electricity that is supplied to produce this hydrogen. So we need to have the right policies to make sure that we have very competitive and low price electricity. Okay, and this doesn't mean subsidies. This means that we need licensing and permitting to be really agile, to be able to put all the capacity that we need, all the renewable capacity, either solar, onshore wind, offshore wind in the North Sea, in the Atlantic, in inland. We need to speed those processes up, but we also need to understand how the price mechanism in electricity works today, and the question of the marginal cost, and understand if that makes sense in a world with 70 or 80% of renewable inputs and volatile renewable resources coming into the system. Okay.
Yeah. So for the audience who don't know how this electricity pricing works, you already mentioned marginalized cost, right? So if I understand correctly from our talk, basically the highest cost wins, right? So all this renewable energy is pretty cheap, and then we reach a demand level where, for instance, gas turbines have to kick in, way more expensive, and all of a sudden, all that electricity, also the cheaper electricity coming from renewable sources, are suddenly priced at that higher price point, and that is a challenge for hydrogen, right?
That is a challenge for hydrogen, and that is a challenge for the whole economy that will pay an extra cost. Well, I'm calling it an extra. It's the right cost given the model that we've drawn for the market. But we're developing a pilot that has been recently approved by the European Commission, and it's undergoing for 1 year in Iberia, in Portugal and Spain, and which will allow the governments to have a cap on the price of natural gas when it goes to producing electricity. And so if this difference will be paid by the whole system, but it will be much less than if the whole market paid for the whole the other input coming in being remunerated at the price of gas. So it's a different approach, and I think it will be an interesting way to balance between energy production and hydrogen production. So we also must take into consideration that this needs to be very careful, because otherwise we will menace the renewables development in itself. If this price is too low, we don't pay for the new capacity on the energy that we really need to produce the hydrogen. So that this needs to be balanced and studied. It's complex, but on our view, it will be a way to make sure that the whole value chain is remunerated, and that we will have investment along the whole value chain and some stability.
Yeah, so we really need a sort of system change to deal with this changing landscape. And for the people who who are interested in this, your booth is number D08, that's D08, and it's all the way in the beginning there of the hall. So if you do have any questions afterwards, then make sure to visit the booth there. So you mentioned two challenges or opportunities, I should say.
Yeah.
I happen to know there are more, so please tell us.
Yeah. There are two more that are very important to develop green hydrogen and, well, low carbon hydrogen in Europe. The third, and which I think it will have to happen very quickly, because it will allow us to develop a common hydrogen market in Europe even before we have the infrastructures to start moving product around. has to do with certification and guarantees of origin and trading these guarantees of origin. So we must create the mechanisms that will allow someone producing cheap hydrogen, green hydrogen in Portugal or Spain or Italy or Greece or Sweden, doesn't matter, to trade it, and an industry in the Netherlands or in Germany that doesn't have access to cheap hydrogen being able to buy that title and use it in their balance. And that product would be used locally without all the energy costs and the carbon burden that it would have to move that product here, okay? So this is, I'd say this helps to kickstart the market. And for the first 5 or 10%, this would be a very useful way to build the green hydrogen market in Europe, okay? But obviously afterwards and during the next years, we really need to build the infrastructures that will allow us to move hydrogen around, okay? I believe that often it will be useful to bring production to the places where hydrogen is cheap, but I don't think that is sustainable in the long term. So we'll need to fully decarbonize all Europe. And for that to happen, we really need to understand if we'll have hydrogen around forever, then we need to invest in a backbone for hydrogen. And probably we need to invest in a hydrogen pipeline grid across Europe, either converting existing one or building new capacity. Even bringing hydrogen from out of EU, from Northern Africa or from Ukraine, hopefully, it would be very helpful for us to reach, not only to reach the targets that we have, but to do it at a cost competitive way. So this is a big, big challenge for those investing in infrastructures also. But I think these 4 points kind of synthesize the challenges and opportunities that we all face in the coming 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. And for those last two, I can imagine that, you know, certification and guarantees of origin also help sort of decrease the load on this infrastructure, right? Because you need to move the hydrogen less.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
So whenever we can, if we can do this, it's not very different from what we do today with oil products. Like we have a refinery in Portugal, we have other players with refineries in Spain. We don't get our product to Spain to sell it there, we do swaps. In this case, it's a little different because we would be selling a title. But at the end of the day, the impact in terms of decarbonization is exactly the same. So it's, I think it's a very good way to do it.
I think so too. I think that was a very good overview, more broad, about the implications of this, you know, changing landscape on the energy system. And I want to thank you, Diogo, sorry, for this interesting talk. Can I please get an applause?
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.